Oh boy, here we go again. I'm into doing response videos these days. I've got nothing else to say. Um, just read Harris Pilton's comment on my last video about Static Traveller's video, if that makes sense. And it was very interesting what you had to say, HP. Um, yeah, I know what you mean about bottom 25%. I started out a year earlier than other kids at school, so I was always the youngest um, kid all the way through school, right through. I was always a year younger than my classmates. If I started at 4 instead of 5, is what I meant to say. My head's like cotton wool, allergies, springtime. Um, so I was actually, a very bright student. I pretty much taught myself to read before I even got to first class. And but once we got through that kindergarten and that intermediate class, I forget what it's called, but it was the best class between kindy, which was really childish, as obviously, but then I forget what it's called, it was just that intermediary year before you go into first class in Australia anyway, was the best year ever at school. The only year in school I ever enjoyed, because instead of learning numbers and things by rote, which was all first class um, you were taught to think for yourself, like growing um, cotton balls with in water and putting seeds in them and watching them grow, um, learning nursery rhymes like, that one about an egg that falls off a wall, Humpty Dumpty. But you didn't just read it. You learnt to read it, but at the same time, you got to put eggs and things and build little things. A very, very, very creative class, you know. Oh man, as soon as I hit first class, I thought, this is fucked. How the hell am I going to get through 12 years of this shit? And I barely managed. I was thrown out eventually. I was given that wonderful old. I've been shafted from government jobs in a similar fashion. They can't actually sack you, but they can find ways to make you not want to be there. Oh Christ! And I remember I got chucked out at age 16 from. They tried to make me. So I went from being a smart kid to getting down to the lowest maths class. I won't go into the details. There's a reason. We moved interstate and they were 2 years behind New South Wales. Blah 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 blah. So I sort of became a dumb student in certain subjects because of that. So I know what you mean. I was in 1 year. I was actually the second. I got the second best mark in the advanced history class, and the second lowest in the lowest maths class. Go figure, huh? It's yeah. Anyway, yeah. So interesting point, HP. Yes. But this wonderful channel, Word in Your Ear or Word in Your Attic, they can be annoying, those two. They talk over the top of each other, and I just keep going, shut up, fucking shut up. But it was actually a good one today. They had Paul Gorman as a guest, and he was one of the writers. I remember the name. And they were actually, because they were all writers about music, and they all worked for the pop papers from the 70s right through up until whenever, 90s probably, when it all died in the arse. But what the point they were making was, and it's a very, very pertinent point, I have to make a video about it, because um, it was all, pop music was just about the music and pop. That's all it was. And sometimes there'd be a crossover and movie stars were sort of in the same bag. Elvis was not really a pop star. He was a movie star. He was in a movie every year for years. Once his records didn't sell as many, his films were still successful. So that 50s pop movie thing is almost like when Kylie Minogue came along, whenever the hell that was. going back to that sort of stuff, mindless fairy fluff. But there was a great period there, starting with the Stones and the Beatles and the Animals and all that, and where people started to take music a bit more seriously. And I'm not talking about jazz. That's just something else again. Jazz is in the same bloody bag as classical. It's for nut jobs. It's for weirdos and nerds, right? I have some jazz, I have some classical. I like it, but it's not the first thing I'm going to put on if I'm going to put on some music, all right? So, yeah. Oh, that's right. Oh, I forgot what Mr. McQueen, what do they call the Prime Minister of the school, headmaster. He said, okay, I've just done so many things to piss him off. It took 6 weeks off to go surfing. And when the exam results came back, I failed every subject. And I tore up the results and threw them in the garbage bin. And eventually my parents found out. Oh, anyway. So, yeah, I had to go into the office with my dad. And we stood there and he said, well, you've got two options, David. You leave with a reference or you leave without one. I said, I'll go with a reference, thanks. And it just said, David attended this school from 1962 to 1967. That's all it said, nothing else. And it didn't mean a fucking thing because I lied my way into my second job. I basically, in my exam results, they got all, it was the start of this political correctness bullshit. It was back in the 60s, mate. It's not new. And if you fail the subject, but only failed it by a certain percentage, they put the result as a lower level award. It's a bit like saying a garbage collector is a sanitation engineer. So basically half my... so I went to this... I got fired from the tax department. Not fired, but it was one of those you can leave with or without jobs, okay? I left that very day. That was out of there. And got this job at ACI Glass, which was a huge corporation in the art department. And just that's how I got into my field of work, photography, darkroom work. But I just bullshitted my way into a job. All that crap I went through at school was all for fucking nothing, basically, because in those days it was full employment. You didn't like a job, you just walked out. I did it many times. You worked there for half a day and you go, oh, fuck this shit. I'm gone, see ya. Don't worry about paying me. You just walk into the next one. Wanted, workers wanted. You walk in, got a job? Yeah, okay, I'll have it. But I walked into this place and he looked at my results and he said, oh, that's interesting. You got a credit there and ordinary pass there. I didn't get any advanced because I'd given up on school long before that school certificate. And I got 2 lower level awards, which means I failed. I failed the subject. I probably got 38% out, if you got 20% like you, HP, or 25%, they just would have put failed. But, yeah, I probably got 38, 39. And I just lied, bare-faced lied to him. I just thought, oh, this is how the real world works. Let's see what happens. I said, yes, I credit's good and ordinary, and most people tend to get those results. And it's BS, and I'm 17. And then he said, what's the lower level award? I said, oh, I sat there. That's when you sit for the advanced subject, the advanced exam, and you don't quite get the required marks for an advanced pass. So it's between advanced and credit, which I made it up. I just made up this bullshit thing that didn't. It actually meant that you were below ordinary and failure. You're down. Look. Oh, I wish I could make more sense. I'm so out of it on allergies today. Anyway, quick, it's 9:36 a.m. Yeah, great thing. And what they were saying was that in the old days, before the internet, you had to do everything took an effort, and you had to find things out yourself. And the New Musical Express and Rolling Stone in their heyday, in their glory days, the 70s basically, taught us so much more about politics, um, great writers, stuff you never ever heard about at school, ever. And there was no other way of finding it out in those days. No internet, no groovy radio stations. Everything was Squaresville, and I would never have heard about my favourite writers or my favourite musicians or many other things that were my favourites. Not so much in my old age, but when I was in my 20s and 30s, this was a big learning curve for me. And I thanks and a thumbs up to the New Musical Express. That was my education in the field of the arts, and brilliant stuff. Then it went all polished and glossy with Mojo and Uncut and so many of them. I worked out once that I was getting $150 a week pay. I can't remember what year it was, but it was like an average pay at the time. And I worked out that I was spending $70 a week on magazines, half my pay. I gave up buying the latest fashions, gave up buying records even virtually for a while because I was spending so much on the pop magazines and newspapers of the day. That was that was like the YouTube, the internet of its time. That's what you were interested in, and the people that had similar interests were reading, and it was so important. And I miss it, I really do. And it was sort of sad because these guys are really old. They're my age, they're all old and wizened and beaten up looking now. But it was just interesting. They were glory days. And anyway, HP, um, you're all right, mate. You're a winner. Everyone's a winner, baby.